Well, top House Republicans are scrambling to fill the leadership void after Eric Cantor's loss. Top Democrats are fighting hard against the perception that Cantor's loss puts the final nail in the coffin for immigration legislation this year, or frankly, for the rest of the Obama presidency.
The idea they can't do immigration reform because Eric Cantor lost his election is another phony excuse. Eric Cantor was never the solution on immigration. He was always the problem.
Some Republicans, including David Bratt, here on the Daily Rundown, said Cantor's defeat was about more than just the immigration issue.
No, I think it's more than that. I mean, I've been trying to get it through to my local press. I give a stump speech. It goes about 20 minutes, and immigration is a part of that aspect. But I ran on the fiscal issues and the Republican creed.
At the end of the day, the Republican establishment in Washington, D.C. is not listening to the base of the party, the grassroots conservatives, and they're concerned. It's not just immigration; it's issue after issue.
The president echoed the need for legislative action at a fundraising event Wednesday night, saying in part, quote, "Some of the conventional wisdom talks about, oh, the politics of immigration reform seem impossible now. I fundamentally reject that, and I will tell the Speaker of the House that he needs to reject that." While the politics play out in Washington, there's a growing crisis along the border where since October, more than 47,000 unaccompanied children have crossed into the U.S. illegally.
Undeniably, there is a problem of humanitarian proportions in the Rio Grande Valley sector that we must deal with. I've asked that we consider all lawful options to deal with this situation. If there are options, I want to hear about them.
Illinois Senator and Assistant Majority Leader Dick Durbin joins me now. Senator, good morning to you, sir.
Good to be with you, Chuck.
Well, look, I know you don't want to believe that for immigration reform is dead, but the politics seem to point in another direction, at least what's going on with House Republicans. Paint me a plausible scenario that somehow gets a piece of immigration legislation on President Obama's desk before he leaves office.
Let me just say point blank, Chuck, call the Senate immigration bill on the floor of the House of Representatives and it will pass. In this district, the 7th District of Virginia that Eric Cantor lost Tuesday night in his primary, 72% of the voters in the exit polls said they supported comprehensive immigration reform. You know, there's a spin going on here by those who don't want to see reform, that's what the issue is all about.
But let me pause you there for a minute. You do know that everybody has a different, just like there's so many definitions right now of amnesty because it's been perverted, there's a lot of you can't, I mean, that poll to me was extremely flawed for a number of reasons, but one of them is comprehensive immigration reform means so many things to so many people. You know what I mean? On that phrase alone.
I understand that, Chuck. But our bill, which we crafted over months of deliberation, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, progressives, we covered the waterfront in terms of border security, in terms of making certain that those who are here undocumented go through a process of paying a fine, paying their taxes, learning English, and going to the back of the line. We went through this very, very carefully. Call it on the floor of the House. And let me add this. That election night, 2 elections occurred on the issue of immigration, if you want to raise it. One was Eric Cantor, who tried to straddle the issue, be for it and then be against it. And the other was Lindsey Graham, a certifiable conservative Republican from South Carolina, who won his primary and supported comprehensive immigration reform without equivocation. That, to me, makes the difference. If you stand up and explain to the American people what the bill's all about, you're going to get support.
All right. The likelihood of the House leadership just putting the Senate bill on the floor falls somewhere between slim and none. So, like I said, paint me the plausible scenario that gets something on the president's desk.
I can tell you this. I still believe, I've talked to Congressman Luis Gutierrez and others, I still believe there is a sentiment among Republicans. Congressman Paul Ryan, for example, has been an extraordinary leader on this issue. I believe that if we could bring this issue to the floor, if Speaker Boehner would just give us a vote, I think it's going to pass. And I think that if more and more people make that clear to him, he'll give us that chance.
Is there any different bill, a smaller bill, that the Senate could do with the House that could get something passed that sort of starts to make progress, whether it's a version of the DREAM Act that's coupled with the visa issue, for instance?
Well, there are many possibilities, but let me tell you the basics. The basics are that we have to have border security for the Republican side. We have to have a path to citizenship on the Democratic side. There are many variations on that theme. What we've got to do is engage the House Republicans. After waiting for a year with this bill, this bipartisan bill that passed the Senate, it's their turn to lead.
All right, we obviously have this crisis on the border. You've heard from the Homeland Security Secretary admit that it's a crisis on the border. In many ways, the border patrol is working. You know, they're getting these kids as they come over, but the way the law is written in Congress, obviously we just don't turn these folks around if they're not from Mexico or Canada. What do you do?
Well,
What's
I can
the
tell you
solution here?
What we should do is twofold. First, define this as it is. This is a humanitarian crisis. Literally hundreds of children who are showing up on our borders. 80% of them are from 3 Central American countries: Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala. There is such turmoil and lawlessness there that these children are fleeing for their lives. We have to acknowledge this as the humanitarian challenge, which it is, and make sure that the United States will receive these children in a humane way. Secondly, we've got to really work toward bringing stability in these 3 countries. A massive amount of money being spent on behalf of these children is not what I'm calling for, but enough aid down in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala to lessen the conflict.
Should we be asking other countries to help us out here?
Absolutely. This should be an international effort because it is an international problem, certainly in the Americas.
I want to move to guns here. I was curious to get your reaction to something the president said the other day. It was very striking to me, both in its political analysis, bluntness, but also in where the president feels a little bit powerless. Take a listen. It's on the issue of guns.
The only thing that's going to change is public opinion. If public opinion does not demand change in Congress, it will not change. I've initiated over 20 executive actions to try to tighten up some of the rules and the laws. But the bottom line is that we don't have enough tools right now to really make as big of a dent as we need to. And most members of Congress, and I have to say to some degree this is bipartisan, are terrified of the NRA. The combination of the NRA and gun manufacturers are very well financed and have the capacity to move votes in local elections and congressional elections. And so if you're running for office right now, that's where you feel the heat.
Senator, it was, to me, a very cogent analysis of the situation when it comes to guns and Congress and all that. But there was a part of me that thought he was almost throwing up his hands.
I don't think so. I think just the opposite. I think what the president has said is the truth. Every member of Congress of both political parties would have to agree with the president. He has defined this political challenge. Now we look on a daily, almost daily basis, at least weekly basis, a new gun tragedy, another innocent child killed, another child killed, and we say to ourselves, can't we agree on the basic premise that we shouldn't sell guns to those convicted of a felony or those who are so mentally unstable that they can't handle them? That seems so basic and consistent with constitutional rights. I agree with Senator Reid, who said yesterday, after this terrible incident in his home state, we have to return to this issue.
Senator, very quickly on Iraq, what kind of responsibility do you think the United States has in trying to help Maliki out with this situation?
Listen, we've paid a heavy price in Iraq. 4,484 American soldiers gave their lives in Iraq, not to mention the thousands that came home injured. In terms of sending in forces, absolutely not. In terms of support to Maliki, perhaps to stabilize his situation, I'm not going to rule it out. But let's be careful. The United States has to be very careful in terms of commitments that end up costing so many American lives.
Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, I appreciate you coming on this morning. Thank you, sir.